Well, I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won.
Speaking at the White House earlier, Donald Trump was asked how hopeful he is that a peace deal with Iran will work. He responded, "The war has been won." Yes, this week Donald Trump managed to do two things that rarely coexist comfortably in serious statecraft. Casually assign credit for the start of a war and publicly narrate supposed diplomatic progress that the other side insists doesn't exist. If nothing else, it underscores a defining trait of his leadership style, an inability to keep sensitive matters contained. Trump said today that his Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, was quite disappointed by the prospect of the US negotiating a ceasefire with Iran. Pete didn't want it to be settled, he said, adding that Hegseth and General Dan Kane, the Joint Chiefs, were the only two people that were quite disappointed. Trump called it a good attitude to have, which doesn't really make sense given his repeated claims that the US and Iran are talking and that it's going very well. They were not interested in settlement, he said, of Hegseth and Kane. They were interested in just winning this thing. Just moments earlier, Trump said that negotiations with Iran to end the war were underway right now, claiming Tehran wants to make a deal so badly. Meanwhile, speaking at the Tennessee Air National Guard base yesterday, Trump walked through the moment that his administration pivoted toward military action in Iran. The setting was meant to project control and resolve. Instead, the account sounded almost improvised. He described calling a circle of advisors, including Hegseth and senior military officials, to weigh the options as tensions with Iran escalated. The framing was stark. Continue riding a booming stock market or interrupt that momentum to confront what he cast as a long-standing threat in the Middle East.
We can keep going and get that 50,000 up to 55 and 60 is no end. Or we can take a stop and make a little journey into the Middle East and eliminate a big problem. And Pete, I think you were the first one to speak up. And you said, let's do it, because you can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
What stood out wasn't the familiar justification about Iran's nuclear ambitions or its regional behavior. It was Trump's eagerness to spotlight Hegseth as the person who first pushed for military action. According to Trump, Hegseth was the one who spoke up and urged a strike, arguing the United States could not allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence or evidence of that anyway.
So we are now having really good discussions. They started last night, a little bit, the night before that, and I think they're very good. They want peace. They've agreed they will not have a nuclear weapon, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see. You have to get it done. But I would say there's a very good chance. And it began when I said that we were planning tomorrow on shooting down some of their power plants, and we're going to hold that up. Hopefully we won't have to do it.
In recounting the story, Trump turned a consequential national security decision into something resembling a brainstorming session, one where the decisive idea could be traced back to a single voice in the room. Now, that kind of attribution might play well in a boardroom or on The Apprentice, where decisive personalities are rewarded and credited. In matters of war, it's more complicated. Military action is typically presented as the outcome of layered intelligence, interagency debate, strategic necessity, not as the brainchild of whichever advisor happened to speak first. By singling out Hegseth, who does not have any experience in this area, Trump didn't just praise a subordinate. He simplified the origins of a conflict in a way that invites scrutiny about how such decisions are actually made. And it also feeds into a broader pattern. Trump has long treated private deliberations as material for public storytelling. He literally has no inner monologue. Conversations that would normally remain behind closed doors, who said what, who advocated which option, becomes part of the narrative that Trump constructs in real time. Now, the effect is to blur the line between internal decision-making and external messaging, and so Trump himself has an alibi. But for allies and adversaries alike, it is disorienting. It raises a basic question: which statements are signals and which are simply anecdotes? And this ambiguity becomes even more problematic when paired with the parallel claims about diplomacy. In the same breath that Trump discussed the origins of military action, he insisted that the United States was engaged in very good discussions with Iran and that a resolution could be close. He described a short window, just a few days, in which those talks might produce a deal that would end the conflict. Except there's only one problem there. Iranian officials have publicly denied that any such negotiations were taking place.
And hopefully we can make a deal that's good for all of us, including the Middle Eastern allies that have been very good to us, including Israel, that's been a great partner in this fight. They've really been a good partner in the fight. They fought hard. But we'll see what happens. I think there's a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal. And so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us. And I would say at the end of this period, I think it could very well end up being a very good deal for everybody, as good as if we went all the way and just literally annihilated the place, which if we don't have to do that, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
This disconnect is more than a messaging hiccup. In the middle of an active conflict, claims about negotiations are themselves strategic signals. They influence how markets behave, how allies coordinate, and how adversaries calculate their next move. When a US president suggests that talks are underway and progress is being made, it implies a possible off-ramp from escalation. And when the other side says that no talks exist, it creates a credibility gap that complicates everything. Now, everybody knows that Trump lies, and in fact, it's all he seems to be able to do. But when it comes to an active war zone where the military are presently fighting and there is already loss of American life, it has gone beyond anecdotal. This is not Trump's rally doing his stand-up comedy routine. You see, his approach seems to collapse all of these layers into a single stream of commentary. War planning, diplomatic feelers, and public relations all get narrated in real time, and often with little distinction between confirmed developments and optimistic projections. The result is a kind of informational overexposure. Instead of carefully calibrated signals, there's a steady flow of assertion, some of which may be accurate, others aspirational, and others flatly disputed. Even his description of next steps reflects this tension. On one hand, he floated the possibility of a deal that could resolve the situation without further destruction, but on the other, he made clear that continued military action remained on the table if diplomacy failed, using language that emphasized persistence rather than restraint. The juxtaposition is jarring. A near-term diplomatic breakthrough paired with an open-ended commitment to keep bombing if it doesn't materialize. This is where Trump's communication style becomes more than a curiosity. In international crises, discipline in messaging is not optional. It is a tool of strategy. Leaders typically reveal information selectively, aware that every public statement can shift perceptions and alter behavior. Oversharing, especially when it includes internal dynamics or unverified claims, risks undermining that strategy. And by openly crediting Pete Hegseth as a catalyst for the war, Trump also exposes his administration to a different kind of vulnerability. It invites questions about process and accountability. Was the decision driven by a broad consensus? Was it the president's? Or did it hinge on a forceful recommendation from a single advisor? Was there dissent? And if so, what happened to it? These are not questions that most administrations are eager to highlight, particularly in the early stages of a conflict. But what's troubling for now is how figures like Pete Hegseth, a former Fox News weekend TV host, have leaned into a worldview that treats war less as a tragic necessity and more as a proving ground. The rhetoric coming from his orbit doesn't just emphasize strength, it glorifies destruction for its own sake. Terms like lethality, war fighters, and promises of overwhelming force are repeated so often they begin to sound like ends in themselves, detached from any coherent political objective. This isn't strategy, it's spectacle dressed up as doctrine. There's something unmistakably nihilistic in that posture. Killing becomes abstract, reduced to remote strikes and metrics, while the moral weight of war disappears behind screens and slogans. Even more unsettling, this language is broadcast with enthusiasm, as if violence were a kind of clarity rather than a last resort. In amplifying and rewarding that tone, Donald Trump reinforces a culture where destruction is not just justified but celebrated, less a means to an end than the point itself. And never is there any talk of civilian casualties. At the same time, his insistence on ongoing talks, despite denials, suggests a belief that saying something publicly can help bring it into being. It's a familiar tactic from business and media and from narcissists. Project momentum, and momentum might follow, but geopolitics is far less forgiving. You can't negotiate with a counterpart who is publicly insisting there is nothing to negotiate. Taken together, the comments reveal a leadership style that prioritizes immediacy over insulation. Decisions, deliberations, and diplomatic overtures are all folded into a continuous narrative, delivered directly to the public. It's transparent in one sense, but not necessarily clarifying. Instead, it produces a stream of information that is difficult to pass and even harder to trust. In the end, the issue isn't just about what Trump is saying. It's that he seems to say everything, in a domain where restraint is often as important as action. That instinct may be as consequential as any misinformed policy decision. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, on Global AF, on Legal AF, and on Sundays on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.